Hello future tech leaders, I am Sindhuja. Based on my own experience, I know that learning the right skills can shape our future. What if I say learning was as thrilled as the tech world itself? There we go. A cloud foundation, that's exactly what you will experience. From day one, you will be immersed in the interactive sessions and expert-led courses that covers most of the widely used technologies in the zone of data science to cloud computing, which brings more light to the life of a techie. I'm so excited to help you and unlock the true potential of a technology. Well, then why to wait? Let's see what it unfolds.
If you look at the next module that we have, that is module number 3. This is in terms of virtual networking. In the last session, we started about virtual networking. What are the options? What are the reasons for using virtual networking? What is the significance of virtual networking? I mentioned aspects over here. And I gave you an assignment. Do your assignments. Because when you do this assignment, you will be able to learn and implement these things. Because implementation is also an important aspect of this certification paper. And even as part of your day in, day out jobs that we do, this hands-on will play a very critical role. Let's get started. In terms of virtual networks, one of the primary aspects that I discussed last session was about address space. Whenever you are creating a resource like virtual network, how many IP addresses do you want over here? That thing we have to mention. Within that address space, it will be easier and manageable by breaking it up into number of subnets. How many subnets do you want? And that's the reason why I mentioned about web subnet and DB subnet. Now, when you are creating this networking as a resource, virtual network as a resource, which is the region that you want to create this into. Because all other virtual machines will be in the same region where you have your virtual network. And these resources have to be part of a subscription. I also mentioned about the significance of why you should not have an overlapping address space. Why should you not cover an entire virtual network address space? And I said as far as NSGs are concerned, we'll come to NSGs in this session. That is Network Security Group. But before we go to network as part of my assignment, first thing that we'll do is go to virtual networks. One of the options available here. Let me create a virtual network here. Whatever name you want to give. But before you create this virtual network, you need to specify the resource group here. Whatever name you want. Whatever region you want to mention over here. Once you have mentioned these primary attributes, we need to go ahead and specify the address space. Here we see this is the address space that we have is 10.0.060. This address space has 65,000 above 65,000 addresses. You'll have a larger address space. Within that you create your subnets. By default, when we create our subnet, it has a minimum of one subnet over here. Let me rename the existing one and give it a name as web subnet. Let me keep the range as it is 10.0.24. This will give you 256 IP addresses. 5 of them are reserved. Five of them are reserved. And you have 255 unusable IP addresses. These 5 are for internal communications with the Azure platform. Along with this, let's add one more subnet over here as DB subnet. Let me specify the address space for this as well, 10.2 0T4. We have broken up this into smaller address spaces. As far as security is concerned, I'll come to the section a bit later in terms of what is Bastion host, what is DROS protection firewall solutions. These are in upcoming modules. As a meta information, you can specify the client name over here for which you are doing the session. Now this meta information or these tags will help you easily bifurcate. We are doing this, we are creating these resources for which client, which department, which project, which environment. We have got our address space created. Subnets we created over here. Let's move ahead. Now, whenever you have subnets being created, within each subnet, you can create multiple virtual machines over here. Once you look at these virtual networks, these are foundations for your virtual machines. Whatever IP addresses that we have created over here, the range that we have mentioned over here, all this range of IP addresses will be used to assign private IPs to your virtual machines. That's the core purpose of creating these subnets over here. And once it comes to communication with internet, this is this. Internal communication is actually part of your network security group. How you want to communicate between the machines, between the VM and the outside world. If you look at this first point over here, it says the outbound traffic is allowed by default. Now the question is, who is allowing that communication to happen? Just let me give you a resource for that. And that is possible through Network Security Group. Let me create a Network Security Group over here to show you how these things happen, how the communication has been enabled. Let me keep the same resource group named as WebNSG. As far as tags are concerned, tags are optional. If you see this network security groups, these are the ones which can be applied. These are the ones which can be applied on the subnet level. This can also be applied. This can be applied on subnet level. This can be applied on NIC level. This NIC basically refers to Network Interface Card. You decide where you want to apply it. When you apply it on NSG, it will be only for one machine. It will be only for one VM. Whereas if you apply it onto a subnet, this can be used for multiple VMs. You decide where you want to apply these. Apply this network security group. Now, within this network security group, you will have number of rules that you would want to create. What is and as part of the rule, you can specify what is the source IP addresses, what is the destination IP addresses that people who want to connect to. Along with this, you will have your resources over here to which you want to specify here, that is your port number. You can specify your priority over here because if you have number of rules, what is the priority for each and every rule over here? You can mention that. Along with this, you can also mention whether you want to allow that communication to happen or you want to deny that communication. These things we can mention over here as part of your, that is, network security group, and while specifying the rules, we can mention these things over here. Here, if you see, there are 6 rules by default, and what we are referring to, that is rule number 65 and under when allow internet outbound. Can you see this? Allow internet outbound. It is by default enabled. If you see 65,500 deny all outbound, everything is stopped. Everything is closed by default. Deny all inbound. This is a larger value 65,500. If you want to override these rules, you have to create another rule which is having a lesser value. Lesser value in sense. Lesser value means higher priority. Lesser the value here, which means higher the priority. It will override the rules, which is giving me the bigger number. Bigger the number means lower the priority. Here, allow Azure Load Balancer, allow Internet outbound, allow virtual network outbound, which means we need to be at communication. These are the things which are being allowed over here. Now, I hope this point should be clear. Outbound traffic is allowed by default. Who allows that traffic? Who allows that communication? That is the NSG. Now this inbound traffic is via 2 ways. One is your public IP address and second is the load balancer. Here, if you see, allow Azure Load Balancer inbound. These values also are mentioned as part of your NSG. Depending upon the rules being mentioned, the NSG rules will govern what is the kind of communication that is supposed to happen in case of inbound traffic. When you say public IP address, this public IP address, it will be a separate resource that will have to create. Just give me a moment. Let me take up a public IP address. Any external communication or open on open internet. If you have any communication, allow people to send their requests. In those scenarios, you'll be using public IP address. If you want to specify your DNS over here, let me take up an existing resource group. What is availability zone? I'll come to this a bit later once we discuss about high availability of virtual machines. You can have two types of public IP addresses. One is static public IP address, for which the IPs will not change, remain consistent. Or you can create a dynamic public IP address, which means while the resource is shut down, while the resource is not working, you don't have any IP address being assigned to it. This is the public IP address which is being assigned over here and associated with the DNS. What I was mentioning about this public IP address. We will come to public load balancer a bit later once you come to the load balancing section. Now, once it comes to communication between Azure resources, I can communicate using a virtual network. I can communicate through virtual network to respect public IP addresses or private IP addresses which we have created whenever the communication is happening across virtual network. It will happen via your private IP addresses or the local DNS being associated with the members, another member at you. Another aspect that you see over here is you can communicate via the service endpoints. You can communicate via your private endpoints as well. Now, this is between service to service communication. This is using service to service communication. Another option to have is you can communicate via VNet peering. What is this VNet peering? We'll come to this in much more detail. What is the service to service communication? What exactly is it communicating with? This is service to service communication. A storage account with communicating or storage account will be using other set of resources. An application will be communicating with storage account resources or databases. That is called a service to service communication. Actually, the service doesn't communicate. It is a user's request which goes to a web application. That web application would communicate to storage account. It's that way to fulfill a particular action or activity that you want to create, like a .NET connected to SQL server. Yes, that's right, the dot. Now, in this scenario that you said, .NET application will be running onto a web application, ASP.NET web application. That web application will communicate to storage account or that web application will communicate to SQL database. This is all happening within Azure. But there will be scenarios where you want to communicate between other members as well. That is your on-premises resources. There I can have on-to-site communication or I can have side-to-side communication. Now, this is a very important point and I will not be able to explain it if I don't use a diagram over here. Tool here. What you see is a single virtual network. Within that I have two subnets. If I want to segregate it further, I can create another net as well and respective subnets within that. Say, let me call it as net 1. This is VNet 2, right? If I want to enable communication between machines which are in both the environments, what I need to do is I need to enable communication between these two machines by using VNet peering, or I can use VNet to net connectivity. Right now, VNet to VNet connectivity. This was the older one, and when we were using VNet to VNet connectivity, this was using something called as Gateways VPN Gateway. This was using VNet gateways. Now, something which I am not putting over here is within this net 2 also, you'll have respective subnets and you'll have your machines inside. That I am not representing, that it's understood. Now, these virtual networks are on the Azure environment. What if I already have set of resources available within my on-premises environment? You can create a bastion host users also, right? You can create a bastion host also. I am not getting into bastion right now because bastion is more in terms of enabling the RARP connectivity. Sesh connectivity and bastion subnet will be inside the same virtual network. It is not connectivity across virtual networks. Now inside the not across me. Yes, right here. That's why I'm not mentioning that over here. You're right, if it is inside the VNet 1, then yes, not VNet 1 to VNet 2. Correct, correct. Here, let me put details on this. This is my on-premises VNet. Right within my on-premises VNet, I will have my respective on-premises subnets and respective machines over there. When I want to have connectivity between my Azure environment and my on-premises resources, here what I'll do is I'll create something called a side-to-side connectivity. Right? I can use side-to-side connectivity or I can use something called as express route. These are the options available for net to VNet connectivity when it is across two environments. If there is a single machine over here, there is a laptop machine or desktop machine. Right? If I have a single system over here for a single machine, I can make use of one-to-side connectivity. I can make use of one-to-side connectivity. I'll go diagrammatically. Just give me a moment. This will be single. Next, desktop or laptop, and on this machine, what we need to install will be a VPN client. Through this VPN client, we will be able to communicate with our Azure virtual network. These two resources, Net1, VNet2, these are a part of Azure. This is my on-premises virtual network. This is my external laptop or desktop machine, which is trying to connect to Azure resources. Is this part clear to everyone? What are other options for communication? It will be same for on-premise VNet. Also write point to site. No one to site. Why do you need for on-premise VNet? Oh, I'm already in the network that the naming convention is not point to site. But yes, the implementation wise, it is the same thing on even if somebody is working from home and they are trying to connect to on-premises VNet. You will have a VPN connectivity, correct? And what you need to install is a VPN client. That way you are. If you are saying it's correct, but that the term is not point to site for the VPN. It's called the VPN client. This term, point to site, came into existence when it was connectivity from connected to Azure environment. This is what I was trying to showcase. What is point to site? what is site-to-site, and what is Azure Express Route. Azure Express Route is a separate service altogether for passing huge amount of data from your on-premises environment to your Azure environment. If you look at your virtual networking, I already mentioned about the options available. Once it comes to your virtual networking or filtering your network traffic, which of the IP addresses are, which of the source IP addresses can communicate with which of the destination IP addresses. All those things will be part of your network security group. Here why we were creating network security group. We saw the options there, which were pre-defined rules, but we did not look at what are the rules that we want to create. Here, let me go to inbound security rules, right? If you look at the source options, you have IP addresses, service tag, application security group. What is the source where the request is coming from? Secondly, if you know that this source will be sending a request by using a specific port, you can enable that port as well in terms of, but this is more from this client's perspective. The source IP address is where the request is coming from. From the client perspective, this is what we have with us. That is in terms of destination. In terms of destination, what is the IP addresses that you would want? Virtual network that you would want, right? Application security group that you want to create over here. Along with this, what is the port that you would want to enable over here for communication? I should not mention about the service. These are the services which you will be communicating with: Radius Cache Cassandra, Bongo, RDP, HEPS, School connectivity. What is the kind of connectivity that you would want from your environment over here? Now, since this is web energy, let me open HETIP port over here. Let me give it a name as HEP priority 100. From client's perspective, I don't have a problem. Any source, any port, I'm with it. Destination, any service at T. Let me do an add over here. Let me create one more rule: source, any destination, any service, EPS. Allow whichever resources you want to allow communications for. Let me open one more service repeat because I will be creating Windows machines over here. Priority to reliability. You realize I'm making these provisions before creating the virtual machine and generally in real world scenarios. How it happens is this will be something which is done by the networking team. All these actions that I am doing will be done by the networking team, and the server team will go, and while the server team is creating the VM, they will utilize these resources. If you look at network security groups, this is what I was mentioning about significance of network security group. And how do you create rules over here for your environment? Apart from this, you can also have something called as network virtual appliances. Now, what are these network virtual appliances? In VEVI, as we call them. What is the purpose of this? Now, before these communications happen with the relevant machines or relevant subnet, I would want to filter it through a firewall, right? Whether we want to allow that communication to happen or we don't want to allow that communication to happen. Filtering of incoming requests and filtering of outgoing responses. Those things we can do by using network virtual appliances. Generally, these network virtual appliances will be as your proxy server. And using that proxy server, you may also go ahead and implement a firewall because you need to keep an eye on what is going out, what is coming in which of these, in case I want to block some kind of communications. Right? Those kind of actions I can take only when I am filtering that network traffic, and that is the core purpose of network virtual appliances. Now the question over here is, once it comes to any of your communications, like I said in the previous communication, I can enable VNet to VNet communication by using VNet peering. I can easily do subnet to subnet communication, which is machine inside this work. Machine inside this subnet can easily communicate with machine in another subnet, right? Machine-to-machine communication across subnets. Machine-to-question communication across virtual networks within Azure by using VNet peering, right? Machine-to-machine communication between two VMs which are across environments on premises and Azure. If I want to change that process by saying that before it goes to DB subnet, it has to go to the third subnet that is containing the firewall. How are you going to do that? How are you going to change or disrupt the system routing or a default routing process? If you want to disrupt that if you will change that, you will have to create your own custom routing, which is called as user-defined routing. Using this option of user-defined routing, we can specify the change in this process, saying that I don't want you to follow the system route. Instead, go to a user-defined route, and through this user-defined route, we will create a routing table, and within that routing table, we will create our respective routes over here. That is your BGP routes. Now, using these routes, we'll be able to specify that any communication going to front-end subnet, should be stopped. It should be first taken to the virtual appliance. From that virtual appliance firewall, we will verify and then it will go to front-end subnet. Same thing also for your database as well. In terms of your back-end subnet, here, what we would want to do is it should be first. Since back-end or a database is the most critical resource, we would want to make sure it first gets filtered over here. We will verify that everything is appropriate and then you will send this request to the database subnet. Does it make sense to everyone? Can you go over again please once? Before that, looks like both the jobs are the same, right? Is it? Is it something like third-party firewall, like Checkpoint or something? We use, very valid point, and they are very mentioned when you say network, commercial network, virtual appliance. Like I said, it could be a proxy. It could be a third-party resource that you are creating, or it could be as your firewall service also. What Microsoft has done is Microsoft has given you a pre-existing service, Microsoft Managed Service, called as Firewall, Azure Firewall. The VM which gets created is managed by Microsoft itself. You don't have to create that. I will give it to you as a service, right? Second option which I said is you can make use of Azure Firewall. Let me go to Azure account once again, and here let me go to networking. Within networking, I have Azure Firewall. If you don't have a pre-existing resource, you may want to evaluate if I have an option given by Azure. You have two options or two. You can configure it within your environment. Depending upon your requirement, you can make use of Azure Firewall in the service. You can configure it over here within your environment. Entire end-to-end solution over here, how this entire thing will work. How do you go ahead create your firewall subnet over here? How do you create your firewall service given by Azure within your subnet, and it will help you to protect your underlying environment, the workload that you are creating over here. If you look at the steps over here, right? How should you create the steps and what will be the options over here? All those members are being, all those steps have been specified. Let me share this URL with you all in case you want to. Sorry, I think this is not reaching to everyone. Are you able to see the resource? See the URL. Now I can connect. See your chat window. What I was mentioning about over here is the significance of network security groups, significance of network virtual appliances. Right here, Azure Firewall that you see is a network virtual appliance. Right here, you can go ahead and create your routing table to change the default behavior of the Azure environment, which means no direct communication to front end subnet, no direct communication to back end submit. Everything has to go via network virtual appliance. Let's proceed further to the next member. The next member over here is virtual network peering and VPN gateways. I don't know why this company should come over here. This comparison should come later because by now we have not discussed about what is net peering and how do you do this net peering. This should come later. This is where I'll stop in terms of virtual network environment and discussion on user-defined routing. User-defined routing, I hope everybody is clear with it. Why not once it comes to user-defined routing? User-defined routing is external communication. And when we are doing this external communication, how do you enable communications between subnets? Like I said earlier, it's by default enabled. You want to change that process. If you have to change the default behavior, you need to create a custom routing over here. And I have also shared a URL with you all, where you all can do is steps on your own. These are like lamps. You look at these tutorials. These are like lamps within your environment. How to create a subnet, how to create a how to get a VNet, how to get a submit inside that. How do you do it? These are the options which are step-by-step details given to you, which you all should try out now. One thing which is very critical for everybody, once you have done with your tutorials, once you have done with your lab, right, make sure you delete all the resources. Don't leave out any resource, whether it is virtual network or storage account, virtual machine. Delete all the resources, right? Because every resource, like I have mentioned earlier, has a cost with itself, right? Once you have practiced these things, you have understood how this entire thing works. Make sure you delete the resources. Clear, everyone? This will be the assignment for you all. First of all, let's talk about how to create a firewall subnet. How do you create a workload submit? How do you create your firewall resource over here and enable communication with your workload? Please do your assignment without fail. And finally, do not forget to like, share and subscribe to our channel.